Lady Seris of House Valen stood before the Council of Elders, her head held high despite the sentence being pronounced. "You are found guilty of treasonous advocacy," the High Elder intoned. "You have publicly opposed the Dominion's rightful expansion into contested territories. You have questioned the authority of this council and the decisions we have made in service to our people. You have prioritized the interests of lesser species over the advancement of Thraxi civilization." Seris kept her expression neutral. She'd known this was coming the moment she'd spoken against the proposed territorial expansion that would displace indigenous populations. She'd argued that conquest without consent was tyranny, that advanced civilization carried obligations to less powerful species. The elders had called it treason. "For these crimes," the High Elder continued, "you could be executed. Your house could be stripped of all honors. But we choose a punishment that will serve as greater warning to others who might follow your path of misguided idealism." He paused, and Seris saw the cruel satisfaction in his ancient eyes. "You will be married to a human. Captain Nathan Cross, a military liaison assigned to our joint defense forces. Your noble bloodline will be diluted. Your political voice will be removed. Your status will be reduced to that of a human spouse, a degradation that will remind all Thraxi what happens when one forgets their place and their duty to their people." The words hit like physical blows. Marriage to a human. In Thraxi culture, it was considered one of the worst fates a noble could face. Humans were useful allies militarily. Their tactical adaptability and willingness to take risks made them valuable partners in defense operations. But culturally, the Thraxi considered them primitive, emotionally chaotic, short-lived, prone to violence and disorder. The idea of bonding with one, of sharing blood status with a human family line, was seen as degradation. They could have killed her. They could have simply stripped her of title. But this was worse. This was designed to humiliate her house, to remove her from all political influence, and to send a message to any other noble who might dare to dissent. "The ceremony will be held in 3 days," the High Elder concluded. "You will comport yourself with appropriate dignity, or we will reconsider harsher punishments." Dismissed. The wedding ceremony was deliberately humiliating. It was held in a minor temple rather than the grand cathedral her station would normally warrant. Only minimal witnesses attended, enough to make it legally binding, not enough to honor her house. A junior priest performed the rites, rushing through words that should have been sacred. Seris wore the traditional bonding robes, but the colors were muted rather than the vibrant display a noble wedding should feature. Everything about the ceremony screamed, "This is punishment, not celebration." When Captain Nathan Cross entered, Seris looked up despite herself. She'd built expectations based on her culture's prejudices about humans. She'd imagined him as brutish, perhaps aggressive, certainly lacking the refined bearing of Thraxi nobility. Someone crude enough to accept this arrangement, to take a noble Thraxi wife not through courtship, but through political decree. The reality was different. Nathan Cross was composed. He moved with controlled precision that suggested military discipline. He wore formal human ceremonial dress that was simpler than Thraxi equivalents but carefully maintained. His face showed discomfort with the circumstances, but also dignity. He clearly understood this was awkward and unwelcome, but he was carrying himself with respect anyway. When he looked at her, just once, as he approached the altar, Seris saw something that confused her completely. Sympathy, not desire, not triumph at claiming a noble Thraxi bride, not even resignation or duty-bound acceptance, just sympathy, as if he understood this was unwelcome for her and he regretted his part in it. The ceremony proceeded with uncomfortable efficiency. The junior priest rushed through the ritual words, clearly wanting to be done with this distasteful duty. The witnesses stood silent, not offering the traditional blessings that should accompany a bonding. Then came the moment of physical joining, the part Seris had been dreading most. In Thraxi culture, touch conveyed power dynamics. The joining of hands during bonding ceremonies was symbolic. The dominant partner would grip firmly, asserting their authority, while the lesser partner would accept with appropriate submission. Seris braced herself. She expected Nathan to grip her hand possessively, to assert the dominance that human males were supposedly prone to remind her that she belonged to him now regardless of her noble birth. Instead, Nathan took her hand with unexpected gentleness. Not weakly, there was definite strength in his grip, but carefully, deliberately. As if he was aware she might not want to be touched, and he was trying to convey respect through that contact. His hands were warm, that struck her first. Thraxi ran cooler than humans, and his warmth felt foreign, not unpleasant, just different. Strange. His grip was firm enough to complete the ritual, their hands properly joined as the priest pronounced the binding words, but loose enough that she could pull away if she chose. As if he was giving her that choice even in a moment where legally she had none. Seris looked up at him in shock, trying to understand what was happening. Nathan met her eyes, and his voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "I'm sorry this is happening to you. I'll try to make it as bearable as I can." It wasn't romantic, it wasn't passionate, it wasn't even particularly warm, it was just kind. And that kindness, in this moment of deliberate cruelty from her own people, cracked something inside Seris that she'd been holding rigid since her sentencing. The ceremony concluded. They were pronounced bonded under both Thraxi and human law. The witnesses dispersed quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the entire proceeding. And Seris realized her life had just changed completely. She was married to a human, removed from Thraxi political society, and bound to someone she knew nothing about except that he'd shown her unexpected gentleness in a moment she'd expected humiliation. They were escorted to what would be their shared quarters, not in the noble district where Seris's family estate stood, but in the human sector of the capital station. Another deliberate humiliation. She would live among humans now, removed from Thraxi society and surrounded by beings her culture considered lesser. The quarters were modest by Seris's standards, but clean and well-maintained. Standard military housing for a mid-ranking officer, functional, organized, lacking the elaborate decoration of Thraxi noble residences. Nathan showed her through the space with careful politeness, pointing out basic facilities. When they reached the sleeping chambers, he said something that completely shocked her. "You can have the primary bedroom. I'll take the secondary chamber. You need your own space." Seris stared at him. "We're married. By law, by tradition, we're supposed to—" "By law, we're married," Nathan interrupted gently. "That doesn't mean I'm entitled to invade your privacy or make demands you never agreed to. You didn't choose this. I didn't either, honestly, but I at least wasn't being punished. You were. The least I can do is give you space to process that." He was already moving his belongings toward the smaller secondary chamber as he spoke, as if the matter was decided. "I don't understand," Seris said, and hated how lost she sounded. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing you're not willing to give. We're legally bound, yes. We'll need to appear together for required functions. Your sentence apparently includes maintaining a visible marriage. But in private, you deserve space and autonomy. This is your home too now. You should feel safe here." Over the following days, Nathan maintained careful distance. He was present for required public appearances. They attended a formal military function together, where the Thraxi in attendance looked at Seris with mixture of pity and disdain, while the humans seemed uncertain how to treat her. But in their quarters, Nathan treated the space like shared diplomatic territory rather than a marital home. He asked permission before entering rooms. He established routines that gave Seris extended periods of solitude. He never touched her except when protocol required it for public appearances, and even then his touch was brief and respectful. Seris was initially suspicious. This had to be strategy. He was trying to lower her defenses, make her compliant through false kindness before revealing his true nature. But as days became weeks, Nathan's behavior remained absolutely consistent. He treated her with respect, not because he expected something in return, but apparently because he believed she deserved respect. She started observing him more closely, trying to understand what kind of person he actually was. Nathan was a military officer. That much was clear from his discipline and routines. But he wasn't the aggressive warrior she'd expected. He read extensively. She saw him studying Thraxi political philosophy, works on ethical governance, treatises on indigenous rights. He was trying to understand her culture, her world, the context that had led to her punishment. He was patient with language barriers when they arose. Seris spoke decent standard, but there were cultural concepts that didn't translate cleanly. Nathan never showed frustration when she struggled to explain something or when he misunderstood. And when she was angry, which was often, grieving the loss of her political voice and her place in society, he didn't demand she suppress it. He just gave her space to feel what she was feeling. About a month after their marriage, Seris found Nathan on the balcony of their quarters late one evening. He was looking out at the stars visible from the station, his expression distant. She joined him, maintaining the careful distance they'd established, standing close enough to talk, far enough to preserve personal space. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked bluntly. "You could make demands. You could assert your legal rights as my husband. I couldn't stop you, and no one would intervene, not my people, certainly not yours. Why don't you?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, still looking at the stars. Finally, "Because you're a person, not a punishment, not a prize, not a political tool, just a person who got caught in political games she didn't start. You've lost enough, your political voice, your place in society, your freedom to choose your own path. I'm not going to add to that loss by being another person who treats you as less than what you are. What am I then, in your view?" He turned to look at her. "Someone who fought for what's right and paid a price for it. Someone who argued for protecting the powerless, even though it cost you everything. Someone who deserves respect and dignity regardless of what your elders decided your punishment should be." Seris felt something break inside her chest, not painfully, but like ice cracking under spring sun. "You don't even know me. We've been married a month and we barely speak. How can you claim to know what I deserve? I know what you fought for. That tells me enough." Nathan's voice was steady. "And I'm trying to know you better. That's what the reading is about, the questions about your culture. I want to understand the person I'm bound to, not just coexist with a stranger." "Why?" "Because you deserve that too. To be known, to be seen as who you actually are rather than what people decided you should be." That night, Seris cried for the first time since her sentencing. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that this human, this person her culture had taught her to despise as lesser, was showing her more genuine humanity than her own people had. Slowly, carefully, Seris and Nathan developed something like friendship. Not romance, neither was pursuing that, the circumstances were too fraught, but genuine regard. They started eating meals together and actually talking. Not just polite small talk, but real conversation. Seris learned about Earth, about human political struggles that mirrored some of the conflicts she'd fought against. Nathan learned about Thraxi history, about the noble houses and the cultural tensions that had led to her punishment. She discovered he liked music, human compositions that sounded chaotic to her at first, but revealed their structure as she listened. He discovered she wrote poetry, though she'd stopped after her sentencing. "You should write again," Nathan said one evening after she'd mentioned it. "Just because they took your political voice doesn't mean they took your ability to express yourself. Poetry is for nobles with standing. She gestured at the human quarters around them. "I'm no longer that. You're still you. They didn't erase who you are by changing where you live or who you're married to. You're still someone who sees injustice and wants to address it. Still someone who thinks deeply about right and wrong. That's not dependent on noble status." About 3 months into their marriage, Seris asked something she'd been wondering. "Why did you agree to this? They approached you, your command must have explained the situation. Why accept marriage to someone being punished, someone you'd never met?" Nathan set down the report he'd been reading. "You want the truth? Please. They told us, the human officers they approached, what you'd done. That you'd argued for protecting indigenous populations from colonial expansion. That you'd been fighting for something I believe in too. The idea that might doesn't make right, that advanced civilizations have obligations to less powerful ones. They said you were being punished for having principles." He paused. "I figured if you were being punished for believing what I believe, for fighting for what's right, the least I could do was make that punishment less terrible. I volunteered because I thought you deserved someone who wouldn't make this worse than it already was." Seris felt her throat tighten. "You married me, accepted this entire situation to protect me from my own people. I wouldn't say protect, I don't have that kind of power, but I could make it less bad than it might have been. So I did." She cried then, for the second time since meeting him. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that this human had shown her more genuine compassion than anyone in her entire noble life had. Nathan, clearly uncomfortable with tears but trying to be supportive, asked quietly, "Is there anything you need?" I need to understand how you can see me as equal when everyone, your command, my elders, everyone, sees this marriage as punishment for me and duty for you. Because what they see doesn't matter as much as what's true, and the truth is you're someone who fought for what's right and paid a price for it. That makes you worth respecting. The circumstances of how we ended up married don't change your fundamental worth as a person. Over the following months, their relationship deepened naturally. Not into romance immediately, there was still too much trauma, too much forced circumstance for that, but into genuine affection. Trust, the kind of partnership that forms when two people choose to treat each other well even when circumstances don't require it. They developed rituals, morning tea together, before Nathan left for duty, evening conversations about what they'd read or thought about during the day. Seris started helping Nathan understand Thraxi political nuances that his position required. Nathan started teaching Seris about human military strategy, which fascinated her. About 6 months into their marriage, there was an incident. They were attending a formal diplomatic function, one of the required public appearances Seris's sentence mandated. A Thraxi noble who'd opposed her advocacy approached with barely concealed hostility. "Lady Seris," the noble said with false courtesy. "Or should I say Mrs. Cross now? How are you enjoying your degradation? Is human companionship as primitive as we've always been taught?" Seris maintained her composure through years of noble training, but Nathan saw the pain flash through her eyes before she suppressed it. "I am adjusting to my circumstances, Lord Thren," she replied with careful neutrality. "Of course you are. One must adjust when one has fallen so far. I imagine your family is thoroughly ashamed. Your house's reputation, so carefully maintained for generations, now tainted by association with humanity. Such a fitting punishment for your treasonous idealism." They endured the rest of the function, but as soon as they returned to their quarters, Seris's composure shattered. She didn't cry, she was too angry for tears, but Nathan could see she was breaking. "They've taken everything," she said, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "My voice, my position, my family's regard, and now they mock what little I have left. They want to ensure I know exactly how far I've fallen." Nathan, very carefully, asked, "May I touch you? Not as a husband claiming rights, just as someone who wants to offer comfort if you want it." The asking mattered. He was giving her choice. Seris nodded, not trusting her voice. Nathan moved closer and very gently put his arm around her shoulders. Not possessive, not sexual, just supportive. A gesture that said, "I'm here if you need someone." And for the first time since her sentencing, Seris let herself lean into someone else's strength. She put her head against his shoulder and just let go. Let herself feel all the grief and rage and humiliation she'd been holding back for months. Nathan held her carefully, not speaking, just being present. After several minutes, he said quietly, "You haven't lost your dignity. They can't take that from you. They've taken everything else. They've taken your title, your political voice, even your freedom to choose your life partner. But your dignity is yours. It's in how you respond to injustice, in the principles you refuse to abandon even when they punished you for them, in the strength you're showing right now by feeling this rather than pretending it doesn't hurt. No one can take that from you." That night marked a shift. They stopped maintaining quite as much careful distance. They became allies who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. They became partners navigating shared circumstances. They became something neither had quite expected. People who were choosing each other, slowly, despite how they'd been forced together. About a year after their marriage, the political situation changed. The territorial expansion that Seris had opposed so publicly began to fail, exactly as she'd predicted. Indigenous resistance was stronger and better organized than the Thraxi military had anticipated. The populations being displaced were fighting back effectively, and Thraxi forces were taking unsustainable casualties. The economic costs were spiraling beyond projections. The political backlash from other civilizations was damaging Thraxi diplomatic standing. Suddenly, the elders who'd punished Seris for her opposition were looking for alternative approaches. Someone on the council, a junior member who'd privately agreed with Seris's position, proposed bringing her back in advisory capacity. She had expertise in indigenous cultures and diplomatic solutions that could prevent further losses. But there was a problem. Seris was married to a human now. By Thraxi law, that marriage had removed her from traditional political structures. She couldn't hold advisory positions or participate in council proceedings unless her human spouse also participated in Thraxi political life. It was meant to be a barrier. No human had ever participated in Thraxi governance. The elders who'd sentenced Seris expected this requirement to be impossible. They could offer her a chance to return to political work while knowing her human husband would refuse the cultural demands that participation required. Instead, when they approached Nathan with the proposal, he agreed immediately. If it means she can use her knowledge to save lives and prevent injustice, I'll do whatever's required. The elders were shocked. You understand what this entails. You would need to participate in Thraxi political rituals, submit to our cultural protocols, accept subordinate status in most council proceedings since you lack noble bloodline. You would be constantly reminded that you are human in a Thraxi political structure. I understand, and I'm saying yes anyway. Seris's ideas about indigenous rights and diplomatic solutions are important. If I can help make sure they're heard, that's worth personal discomfort. When Nathan told Seris about the opportunity, she was overwhelmed. You'd subject yourself to Thraxi political culture, which barely tolerates humans, just so I can work again. You've been living in human spaces for me for a year. You've adapted to our culture, our routines, our ways of doing things. Seems fair I return the courtesy. Besides, your expertise matters. People are dying because the elders didn't listen to you. If this helps change that, it's worth it. Seris looked at the man she'd been forced to marry, the human her people had given her to as punishment, the person who'd treated her with consistent dignity, who'd given her space and respect, who'd seen her as someone worth knowing rather than a sentence to endure. Nathan, I want to propose something. All right. The elders gave me to you as punishment. They meant it to humiliate me, to strip me of status and dignity. But you've shown me that their punishment became something else. We've built something real here, a partnership, a friendship, something that matters to both of us. She took a breath. I want to formalize our marriage, not just legally, we're already bound by law, but genuinely. I want us to choose each other, not because we were forced, but because we want to. I want to transform their punishment into something they never imagined possible, genuine partnership built on mutual respect and choice. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want? Not what's strategic or what makes political sense. What do you actually want, Seris? She thought about the year they'd spent together. The respect Nathan had shown her from the very first moment, when he'd taken her hand gently during the humiliating ceremony her elders had designed. The space he'd given her to grieve and be angry. The way he'd treated her dignity as non-negotiable even when she was powerless. The way he'd supported her, learned from her, valued her perspectives. The way he'd made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. I want this to be real, she said. Not forced, not legal obligation, but chosen. I want to choose you, Nathan, not because I have to, but because you've proven you're worthy of being chosen. Because you treated me like a person when everyone else treated me like a punishment. Because you gave me dignity when my own people tried to strip it away. I want to choose you, she continued. I want us to decide together that what started as something terrible can become something powerful. That we're partners not because they forced us, but because we're choosing each other. Nathan reached for her hand, the first time he'd initiated physical contact beyond what protocol required. His touch was still gentle, still careful, still conveying respect. Then I choose you too, he said, not because of law or duty or any external requirement, but because you're someone I admire, someone I've come to care about deeply, someone I want to stand beside as an equal partner. I choose you, Seris. I choose this marriage, but this time as something real rather than something imposed. They arranged a second ceremony, private, with only witnesses they chose. Not in a minor temple with rushed words from a junior priest, but in their quarters with words they wrote themselves. When Nathan took her hand this time, it wasn't to fulfill legal requirements. It was genuine commitment. And when Seris accepted his touch, it wasn't with resignation but with choice. She was reclaiming what had been taken from her, the right to decide her own fate, to choose her partner, to transform punishment into power. The first time they kissed, more than a year after their forced wedding, it was not because of obligation or law or external pressure. It was because they genuinely wanted to. Because they'd built something real from the ashes of what was meant to destroy her. Years later, when people asked about their unusual marriage, the Thraxi noble who'd been punished through marriage to a human, who'd somehow transformed that punishment into legendary partnership, Seris always told the truth. I was given to him as punishment. My people wanted to humiliate me, to strip away everything I was by forcing me to marry someone they considered lesser. They expected him to treat me accordingly, to assert dominance, to remind me I'd fallen from noble status. She would smile. Instead, Nathan treated me with dignity. From the very first moment, when he took my hand during that humiliating ceremony and spoke words of kindness I never expected, he saw me as a person. Not as a punishment, not as a prize, just as someone who deserved respect. That dignity, that fundamental respect for my humanity even when I had no power, transformed their punishment into something they never imagined. They gave me to him to destroy me. He treated me with such consistent respect that I healed instead. What they meant as cruelty became the foundation for genuine love. They wanted to teach